I remember the first time I laid eyes on her. It was at a friend's wedding where she was the maid of honor. Her laughter was infectious, her smile bright enough to light up the dimly lit reception hall. I was instantly drawn to her, and as the night wore on, we danced under the stars, lost in our own world. We got married a year later, and I thought I had hit the jackpot. Sarah was everything I wanted: beautiful, intelligent, and kind. She had a way of making me feel like the most important person in the room. Our life together was a series of small, joyful moments. We shared a cozy apartment in the heart of the city, and weekends were spent exploring new brunch spots or binge-watching the latest crime dramas. We had our routines, our inside jokes, and an unspoken promise to always support each other. I worked as a marketing consultant, and Sarah was a freelance graphic designer. It wasn't always easy, but we made it work. But as time passed, I noticed subtle changes. Sarah had started spending more time out of the house, often claiming she was meeting clients or working on projects. I brushed it off at first. She was building her career after all. Yet there was an unease that began to creep into my gut. I would come home to find her distracted, her mind seemingly elsewhere. Our conversations became shorter, and the warmth that once filled our home felt like it was fading. I tried to be understanding, even supportive. I encouraged her to pursue her passions and forge her path, but a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I would catch her glancing at her phone, a quick smile spreading across her face before she would turn it away. I found myself wondering if I was reading too much into it. After all, love was built on trust, and I had always believed in our bond. The turning point came one fateful Saturday evening. I had planned a surprise dinner for us, hoping to reignite that spark we once had. I had spent hours cooking her favorite meal, the aroma of garlic and herbs filling our tiny kitchen. As I plated the food, I imagined her face lighting up with joy. But when she walked through the door, her expression was anything but delighted. She had that same distracted look, as if she were somewhere else entirely. "Hey, you're home early," I said, trying to mask my disappointment. "Yeah, I wrapped up a bit sooner than expected," she replied, her voice lacking its usual enthusiasm. I tried to engage her with conversation, but she seemed distant, her mind elsewhere. I thought of all the times I had brushed off my instincts, convincing myself that everything was fine. But that night, as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, I felt a chasm between us that was growing wider by the day. It was only a few days later that I stumbled upon the truth. I had come home from work early, eager to surprise her again, but this time it was I who was caught off guard. There in our living room, I found her phone buzzing incessantly on the coffee table, a name flashing across the screen that stopped my heart: Liam. I had heard her mention a chef named Liam before, but I had never thought much of it, until that moment. I picked up the phone, my hands trembling. I knew I shouldn't invade her privacy, but curiosity and dread pushed me forward. I unlocked it, and what I found shattered the last remnants of my trust. Text messages filled with flirtation, longing, and plans to meet up. My heart sank as I read their exchanges, each word piercing through my chest like a dagger. The laughter, the promises, the intimacy, it was all there, laid bare before me. I felt sick, a whirlwind of emotions crashing over me: betrayal, anger, confusion. How could she do this to us? I thought of all the moments we had shared, the vows we had taken, and how easily they seemed to have been discarded. The realization hit me like a tidal wave, and I felt as if the ground beneath me had crumbled away. In that moment, my world shattered. I had trusted her completely, and she had thrown it all away for a chef. The thought of it sickened me. I couldn't comprehend how our love, which had once felt so solid, could be reduced to this. As I stood there, phone in hand, I knew that my life was about to change irrevocably. The moment I discovered Sarah's betrayal was like a scene from a horror movie where the protagonist wakes from a nightmare only to find that the nightmare is real. I felt trapped in a surreal reality, my mind racing as I processed the texts on her phone. "Can't wait to see you tonight," read one. "You make me feel alive," read another. Each message felt like a punch to the gut, a reminder of everything I had believed was true, now twisted into something grotesque. I put the phone down, my heart pounding in my chest. The silence of our apartment felt deafening, and I could hear the echo of my own thoughts. Thoughts of betrayal, of anger, and an overwhelming flood of disbelief. How could she? How could she throw away the life we had built together for someone else? I thought we were a team, partners in everything. The very foundation of my trust had been shattered, and I was left standing amidst the rubble. I needed to confront her, but the thought of facing Sarah filled me with dread. What would I say? How could I possibly articulate the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me? I paced the living room, trying to gather my thoughts, but all I could see were the images of her smiling with him, laughing over meals that should have been ours. When Sarah finally walked through the door that evening, I felt my stomach drop. She seemed carefree, completely unaware that her world was about to come crashing down. I watched as she dropped her bag on the floor and headed to the kitchen, her back turned to me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. She turned, her expression shifting from surprise to concern as she saw the look on my face. "What's wrong?" she asked, her brow furrowing. I held her phone out to her, the screen still lit with the damning messages. "What's this?" I demanded, my heart racing as I watched her face drain of color. Her eyes widened, and for a moment she seemed frozen in place. I can explain," she stammered, taking a step back as if my words had physically pushed her away. "Explain what?" I shot back, anger bubbling just beneath the surface. "Explain how you've been cheating on me with this chef. Explain how you've been lying to my face while you plan your little rendezvous." Her expression shifted again, morphing from shock to defensiveness. "It's not what you think, it's complicated," she exclaimed, her voice rising. "Complicated?" I spat. "You're having an affair, Sarah. How can you even begin to justify that?" She took a deep breath, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I didn't mean for it to happen. We were just friends at first. He was supportive, and I guess I got caught up in it all. But it didn't mean anything." My heart felt like it was being crushed under the weight of her words. "It didn't mean anything," I echoed, incredulous. "What does that even mean? You think that makes it okay?" "I'm sorry," she cried, tears welling in her eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you. I love you, I really do." "Love?" I scoffed, feeling a mix of rage and sadness. "How can you say that? You've betrayed me, Sarah. You've destroyed everything we had." I could see the panic in her eyes as she struggled to maintain her composure. "I'll end it with him, I promise. Just give me a chance to make this right." The pain in my chest felt like a physical wound, and I shook my head, unable to process the betrayal. "How can I trust you again? You've broken that trust. You've shattered it." I turned away from her, the weight of the situation crashing down on me. I felt like I was drowning, and no matter how hard I tried to breathe, I was suffocating. I had trusted her with my heart, my life, and in return she had given me a knife to the back. "Please don't do this," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "I'll do anything, just don't leave me." But it was too late. The damage was done, and I could feel the distance between us growing wider by the second. I needed time to think, to process the enormity of what had just happened. I walked out of the apartment, leaving her standing there, tears streaming down her face. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I couldn't stay. I needed to gather my thoughts, but more than that, I needed to figure out what to do next. The betrayal burned deep within me, and I felt a surge of anger rising like a tide. I didn't know what I would do, but one thing was for sure: this wasn't over. I spent the night in a hotel, the sterile room feeling more like a prison than a refuge. I tossed and turned, replaying the confrontation with Sarah over and over in my mind. Each time it felt like a fresh wound, raw and painful. I had never imagined I would find myself in this position, facing the reality that the woman I loved had betrayed me in the most profound way possible. The anger simmered beneath the surface, but alongside it was a deep sense of loss. By morning, I had made up my mind to confront Sarah again. I needed closure, and I needed to hear her side of the story without the emotional chaos of the previous night. I returned home, my heart heavy as I stepped through the door. The apartment felt empty, a stark contrast to the vibrant life we had shared. I found Sarah sitting on the couch, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She looked up as I entered, and for a moment we just stared at each other, the silence thick with unspoken words. "Can we talk?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She nodded, her expression a mix of hope and fear. I gestured for her to sit, then took a seat across from her, creating a chasm of space between us that felt insurmountable. Last night was a lot. I began, struggling to find the right words. I don't even know where to start. I know I messed up and I'm so sorry, she interrupted, her voice trembling. I never wanted to hurt you. I got caught up in it all and I didn't think about the consequences. Caught up, I echoed, incredulous. You're talking about an affair, Sarah. How could you let it get that far? She looked down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Liam was there for me. He listened when I felt overwhelmed. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was just a moment of weakness. Just a moment of weakness. I asked, my voice rising. This isn't some minor mistake, Sarah. You chose to be with him. You chose to lie to me. You chose to betray my trust. I know, she cried, tears spilling down her cheeks. I know I made a terrible mistake, but please believe me when I say that it didn't mean anything. I love you, not him. Love, I scoffed, the bitterness in my voice palpable. How can you say that? You've thrown away everything we built together. You've shattered my trust. Please just give me a chance to explain. She pleaded, her voice breaking. I was feeling lost, and Liam, he made me feel special, wanted, but it was never about him. It was about me not being able to communicate with you. Is that really what it is? I asked, my heart aching. You felt neglected, so you turned to someone else. You couldn't even talk to me about how you were feeling. I should have, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I was scared of burdening you. I thought you were too busy with work to care. I thought I could handle it on my own. That's not how relationships work, Sarah, I said, frustration boiling within me. You can't just run away from your problems. You have to face them. We were supposed to face them together. I know, and I'm so sorry, she said, her voice cracking. I never wanted to hurt you. I made a terrible mistake and I want to make it right. I'll end things with him, I swear. Do you think that's enough? I asked, my voice heavy with hurt. How can I believe you? You've already lied to me. How do I know you won't do it again? Because I love you, she cried, desperation lacing her words. Please just give me a chance to prove it. I'll do anything to fix this. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever it takes. I felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly extinguished by the weight of my anger. You've broken something that can't just be fixed with promises, Sarah. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. It takes time, and right now, I don't even know if I want to try. She reached out, her hand trembling as she tried to bridge the distance between us. Please don't give up on us. I don't want to lose you. But the truth was, I was already losing her. As much as I wanted to believe in the love we had shared, the betrayal loomed large in my mind, casting a shadow over everything. I felt like a fool for trusting her so completely, and now I was left grappling with the reality that our love might never be the same. Right now, I need space, I finally said, my voice firm despite the turmoil within. I can't think clearly when you're here. I need to figure this out on my own. Her face fell and I could see the pain etched in her features. Please don't leave me, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I'm not leaving you, I replied, trying to soften my tone. I just need time to process all of this. I need to understand what happens next. As I walked out of the room, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. The confrontation had not brought me any closer to resolution. Instead, it had only deepened the chasm between us. I felt lost, adrift, in a sea of confusion and hurt. The betrayal had shaken me to my core, and I knew I had to find a way to reclaim my sense of self. But in the depths of my anger, another feeling began to emerge, something darker, more vengeful. The chef, Liam, had taken something precious from me, and I couldn't shake the thought that he deserved to pay for it. I didn't know how just yet, but the seed of revenge was planted, and it was beginning to take root. In the days that followed, I found myself in a haze of emotion, oscillating between anger and despair. The confrontation with Sarah had left me feeling hollow, and I was still grappling with the betrayal that had turned my life upside down. My mind was a chaotic storm of thoughts, but one idea began to crystallize amidst the turmoil: revenge. I couldn't shake the image of Liam, the chef who had wormed his way into my wife's heart. I envisioned him in his pristine white uniform, flipping pans and plating dishes with a smug smile on his face, completely oblivious to the havoc he had wreaked in my life. He had taken something from me that I could never get back, and the thought of him thriving while I was left to pick up the pieces filled me with rage. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I needed to act. I couldn't just sit idly by while he continued to charm my wife and others with his culinary skills. I had to make him pay, and the first step was figuring out exactly who he was and how to dismantle the empire he had built at his restaurant, Culinary Haven. I began my research. I learned that Liam was a well-respected chef in the city, known for his innovative dishes and charismatic personality. His restaurant had garnered rave reviews, and it was always packed with patrons eager to sample his latest creations. I scoured the internet for any dirt I could find, anything that could be used against him or his establishment. I was determined to find a chink in his armor. The first step was to visit Culinary Haven. I needed to see the place for myself, to understand the atmosphere and the clientele that frequented it. I planned my visit for a Friday night, knowing it. Be busy. I dressed carefully, trying to blend in with the crowd, and when I arrived, I was struck by the restaurant's ambience. It was upscale, with dim lighting and elegant decor, and the patrons seemed to be enjoying themselves, oblivious to the turmoil brewing just outside its doors. As I took a seat at the bar, I observed everything. The waitstaff moved with practiced precision, and I watched as Liam interacted with his customers, effortlessly charming them with his wit and culinary expertise. It made my blood boil. He was everything I wasn't: confident, charismatic, and seemingly perfect. But beneath that polished exterior, I knew he was just a man who had crossed a line he shouldn't have. I ordered a drink and began to formulate a plan. I needed to gather information, to find a way to expose him. I eavesdropped on conversations, listened to patrons rave about his food, and watched the kitchen staff as they worked tirelessly to keep up with the demand. I noticed the way Liam interacted with his team. He was demanding, but in a way that inspired loyalty. I could see how much they admired him, and that made me more determined to bring him down. After a few visits, I learned that the restaurant had a reputation for being a hotspot for food critics and influencers. I thought about how I could leverage that. What if I could find a way to tarnish his image? Perhaps a bad review, an exposé on his kitchen practices, or even a health inspection issue could do the trick. I needed to dig deeper. I began to investigate the health regulations surrounding restaurants. I discovered that every establishment had to adhere to strict guidelines, and any violations could lead to significant repercussions. I started to think about how I might be able to turn something small into a scandal that could jeopardize his reputation. One evening, I found myself in a local forum dedicated to restaurant reviews. I noticed that many patrons had left comments about Culinary Haven, praising the food but also mentioning odd things, like the occasional complaint about the cleanliness of the bathrooms or questionable service during peak hours. It was a start, but I needed something more concrete. That night, I concocted a plan. I would pose as a concerned patron, someone who had experienced a less-than-stellar meal at Culinary Haven. I could create a fake account to post a negative review that would catch the attention of food critics. I'd mention things that might not raise immediate suspicion, but would plant the seeds of doubt about the restaurant's overall quality. It was a small step, but it would be my first strike against him. As I worked on crafting my review, I couldn't help but feel a mix of exhilaration and guilt. Part of me knew that what I was doing was wrong, that I was sinking to a level I never thought I would. But the other part of me reveled in the idea of making Liam pay for what he had done to me. I justified my actions by reminding myself that this was about more than just revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity and my life. With each keystroke, I felt a sense of empowerment. I was no longer the victim in this story. I was taking control. I drafted the review, detailing my experience in a way that highlighted the flaws without being overtly malicious. I signed off with a name that was distinctly fake, ensuring my anonymity. Once I hit submit, I felt a rush of satisfaction. This was just the beginning, and I was determined to see it through. I had a plan, and I felt a sense of purpose for the first time since Sarah's betrayal. I would expose Liam for what he truly was, and in doing so, I would reclaim my life. But as I lay in bed that night, A small voice in the back of my mind whispered doubts. Was I really doing the right thing? Would this path lead to healing, or would it only deepen my own wounds? I had crossed the threshold into a world of darkness, and I knew there was no turning back now. The days following my review submission were a whirlwind of anticipation and dread. I watched as the comments rolled in, some agreeing with my assessment while others defended the restaurant and Liam. But it didn't matter. My plan was already in motion. The seed of doubt had been planted, and I was determined to nurture it until it blossomed into something that could really hurt him. I continued to gather information about Culinary Haven, looking for any potential vulnerabilities. I frequented the restaurant more often, noting the kitchen staff's routines and the cleanliness of their operations. I was a shadow lurking in the corners, listening, watching, and waiting for the right moment to strike. Each visit fueled my anger as I watched Liam bask in the adoration of his patrons, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just outside his kitchen doors. Then, one evening, I overheard something that made my heart race. I was seated at the bar, nursing a drink and pretending to read a book when I noticed two employees chatting quietly. They were discussing an upcoming health inspection, and I caught snippets of their conversation about how the kitchen had been in disarray lately. The head chef had been distracted, and there were rumors of expired ingredients being used. My pulse quickened as I realized I had the opportunity I had been waiting for. With newfound determination, I decided to dig deeper. I reached out to a friend who worked in the health department, casually asking about how inspections were conducted and what could lead to violations. It wasn't long before I learned that complaints from patrons, especially ones backed by evidence, could trigger surprise inspections. I felt a rush of adrenaline as I formulated a plan that could potentially cause a major blow to Liam's reputation. I decided to create another fake account, this time, one that would lend credibility to my claims. I crafted a story about a meal gone wrong, detailing how I had found a piece of moldy bread and had seen the staff handling food without gloves. I made sure to embellish the details just enough to make it believable, but not so much that it would raise alarms. After all, the goal was to create doubt and trigger that inspection. Once I submitted my complaint online, I felt a mixture of excitement and guilt. I knew I was crossing a line, but the anger that had fueled my actions made it easy to justify. I was no longer just a betrayed husband. I was a man on a mission, and nothing would stand in my way. A week later, I received a notification that Culinary Haven would indeed be receiving a surprise inspection due to multiple complaints. I felt a surge of satisfaction at the thought of Liam being caught off guard. I could already picture the chaos that would ensue, the panic in the kitchen, the frantic cleaning, and the inevitable fallout from a bad report. As the day of the inspection approached, I found myself filled with anticipation. I returned to the restaurant, pretending to be an ordinary customer, and watched as the staff scurried around in preparation. The atmosphere was tense, and I could see the anxiety etched on Liam's face as he barked orders, trying to maintain control. It was a sight that brought me a twisted sense of satisfaction. When the health inspector arrived, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I stayed at the bar, sipping my drink and pretending to be engrossed in my phone as the inspector moved through the restaurant. I could see Liam's demeanor shift from confidence to apprehension as the inspector began asking questions and inspecting the kitchen. I watched as the inspector opened the fridge, his face contorting into a grimace as he pulled out expired ingredients. My heart raced as I saw the inspector taking notes, and I knew that the moment I had been waiting for was finally here. I could feel the tension in the air, and I relished the thought of Liam's world crumbling around him. This was my revenge, and it felt exhilarating. After what felt like an eternity, the inspector concluded the inspection and called Liam into the office. I strained to hear their conversation, but the words were muffled. I could see Liam's face turning pale as he listened to the inspector's findings. I imagined the weight of the news crashing down on him, the realization that his restaurant could face serious repercussions. When the inspector left, I could see the panic spreading among the staff. Liam emerged from the office, his eyes wild with fear. The facade of the charming chef was gone, replaced by a man who was now facing the consequences of his actions. I watched as he gathered his team, trying to rally them with a speech, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. As I left the restaurant that night, I felt a sense of triumph wash over me. I had executed my plan flawlessly, and Liam was no longer the untouchable chef I had once envied. I felt a mix of satisfaction and something else, an emptiness that gnawed at me. I had taken my revenge, but at what cost? In the following weeks, the reviews of Culinary Haven began to shift. Patrons who had previously raved about the restaurant now expressed concerns about cleanliness and quality. Rumors circulated about the health inspection, and it wasn't long before the restaurant's reputation began to crumble. I watched from the sidelines, a silent observer, as the chef who had once seemed invincible was now fighting to keep his business afloat. But as the dust settled, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I had gotten what I wanted, yet I found myself feeling hollow. I had taken action, but it hadn't brought me the closure I had hoped for. Instead, it had left me questioning my own morality. Was this really the person I wanted to be? I thought of Sarah, of the love we had shared and the trust that had been shattered. I had lashed out in anger, but I was beginning to realize that revenge wouldn't heal the wounds in my heart. I was left wondering if the path I had chosen would ultimately lead to my own ruin as well. As the weeks turned into months, I watched the fallout from my actions unfold like a slow-motion train wreck. Culinary Haven, once a bustling hotspot, had become a shadow of its former self. Patrons who once flocked to the restaurant now whispered about its decline, and the glowing reviews that had once adorned its walls were replaced by cautionary tales. I had succeeded in my revenge, but with every passing day, the emptiness inside me grew. I found myself reflecting on my choices, the path I had taken to achieve this sense of satisfaction. It was a dark journey, one that had transformed me from a loving husband into a man consumed by anger and vengeance. I had taken pleasure in watching Liam's downfall, but now I was left with the bitter taste of regret. One evening, I returned home to find Sarah sitting on the couch, her face buried in her hands. She looked up as I entered, her eyes red and puffy from crying. My heart sank at the sight of her pain, and for the first time in a long while I felt a twinge of empathy. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice shaky. I nodded, unsure of what to expect. We sat down across from each other, the air thick with unspoken words. "I've been thinking a lot about us," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "About what?" "Happened, about everything. I know I messed up and I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want to try and make things right." Her sincerity struck a chord within me, and I felt the walls I had built around my heart begin to crack. "You hurt me, Sarah," I said, my voice heavy with emotion. "You broke my trust in a way I never thought was possible." "I know," she replied, tears streaming down her cheeks. "And I'm so sorry. I've spent every day regretting what I did. I don't want to lose you. I want to fight for us." As I looked into her eyes, I realized that I had been so consumed by my own anger and desire for revenge that I had neglected to consider her pain. Yes, she had betrayed me, but I had also allowed myself to be swept away by the darkness of my own actions. I had sought to destroy Liam, but in doing so, I had also allowed the bitterness to seep into my own heart. "I've done some terrible things," I confessed, the weight of my actions finally hitting me. "Thought that bringing him down would make me feel better, but it hasn't. It's only made things worse. I'm not proud of how I handled things." "I understand," Sarah said, her voice softening. "I've been working on myself, trying to understand why I made the choices I did. I never wanted to hurt you, but I did. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild what we had." In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe there was a chance for us after all. But it would take time, patience, and a lot of hard work. I realized that both of us needed to confront our mistakes, to learn from them rather than let them define us. "I can't promise that it will be easy," I said, my voice steady, "but I'm willing to try if you are. We need to rebuild our trust, and that starts with honesty and communication." Sarah nodded, her expression earnest. "I want that too. I want to be better for you and for us." As we began to talk, peeling back the layers of hurt and betrayal, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, and I knew there would be moments of doubt and pain. But for the first time since everything had fallen apart, I felt a glimmer of hope. I realized that revenge had only served to deepen the wounds in my heart, while the path to healing lay in forgiveness, both for Sarah and for myself. I had allowed my anger to dictate my actions, but now I was ready to take control of my life once more. In the days that followed, I made a conscious effort to let go of the bitterness that had consumed me. I stopped checking reviews of Culinary Haven and focused instead on rebuilding my own life and my relationship with Sarah. We sought counseling together, working through our issues and learning to communicate openly about our feelings. I learned that love is not just about the good times, it's also about navigating the storms together. It's about acknowledging our flaws and mistakes and striving to be better, not just for ourselves but for each other. As I reflected on the journey I had taken, from betrayal to revenge and finally to redemption, I understood that healing was a process. It would take time, but I was committed to walking that path with Sarah. In the end, I realized that the most powerful dish of revenge was not served cold, but was instead a recipe for understanding, forgiveness, and love. And in that realization, I found a strength I never knew I had. The cost of revenge had been high, but the price of love was worth every effort. I was ready to embrace the future, whatever it may hold, with a heart that had been bruised but not broken. This was my story, and I was finally ready to write a new chapter.